Hello everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of The Apparition, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be doing the part 2 of my book haul video. So if you missed the first one, I'll have it linked at the end. I just had way too many books to talk about, and so it's going to be a 3-part series. So last time I did middle grade, YA, and romance. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing my science fiction, my fantasy, and then my paperback thriller and horror books that I have picked up in the last 5 months, I think. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. The first 4 are a little bit tricky because I wouldn't necessarily classify them as science fiction, but they have time travel elements, and so because they have time travel in them, they would be considered science fiction. So kind of like that Octavia Butler book, Kindred. So in that book, it's more historical fiction, but it has time travel. So you find it in the science fiction section, and that's kind of how these books are. So the first one is In This Moment, and this is a part of a 6-book series. I believe there's 6 of them. I already read the first one for my book club and really enjoyed it, and so I wanted to continue on. So I got the second and the third book. So in this second book, we have this woman who can time travel to 3 different points in time. So every time she wakes up in a different timeline. And so the first one that she wakes up in is 1861 and takes place during the Civil War. And then she also goes to 1941, and she's part of World War II, but she's actually a naval nurse and she's on a ship headed for Pearl Harbor. And the third timeline is 2001, where she is a medical student that's trying to become a surgeon. But because she has that modern timeline, it makes it a little bit difficult in the other timelines, especially the one in World War II, where she knows what happens at Pearl Harbor, but she's unable to say or do anything about it. So on your 21st birthday, you get to decide which timeline you want to permanently be a part of. That's just how it works. It's like a genetic thing. And so you time travel your whole life until you're 21, and then you get to pick a timeline that you're just going to live out the rest of your life in. But unfortunately for her, she has fallen in love for a man in each timeline, and now she just doesn't know what choice to make. And then in the third one, this is about twins that time travel together. Their first timeline that they're in is in 1692, Salem, Massachusetts. So they are taking part in the witch trials. And then their second timeline is 1912. And in this timeline, they are part of like the newly invented aviation era, and one of the twins wants to become the first female pilot. So I'm guessing that one twin falls in love with somebody in one timeline, somebody falls in love with somebody in the other timeline, and they want to be together, but they also don't want to lose their love. So it's not a spoiler because I don't know that that's actually happening. That's just my opinion on what I think is going to happen in this one. And then we have A Stitch in Time by Kelly Armstrong, and this is also a time travel romance, and this is about this girl who, her aunt, she has this decrepit manor on the moors, and it's always been haunted, but she found a time slip, and when she goes into this time slip, she meets this man William, and they strike up a friendship, and she enjoys visiting him. But then she doesn't get to see him anymore because it's not her house, it's her aunt's house, and as she gets older, she just doesn't really visit anymore. But after her aunt passes away, she actually inherits this manor, and so she time slips to see her old friend again, and he's this wrathful shell of a man. He's not what she remembers him as, but he had some kind of tragedy. He's had some issues in his life. He had a tragedy that led to some scandal, and it's kind of jaded him. But she is actually seeing ghosts in the modern time that she's in, and she soon realizes that these ghosts are actually part of whatever scandal was happening in his timeline, and so she's going to help him discover what actually happened. And then we have The Maid of Sherwood Forest, and this is part of a series where you go to this costume shop and you put on these clothes, and whatever costume you put on, you get transported to their time period. And so in this one, obviously, she gets transported back to England in the time of Robin Hood, and she actually falls in love with Robin Hood, and so then she can't decide whether to stay with him or remain in the modern era. And then we have Who Wants to Live Forever, and again, this is more of a romance, but it has that science fiction aspect to it because it is set in a futuristic world where people have learned to live forever, but not everybody gets to have this ability. I'm guessing only the privileged few that are rich enough to pay for it is my guess, but not everybody gets to live forever. But we have these 2 people who are seemingly soulmates, but he gets the opportunity to live forever, and so he's like see ya. And she's obviously devastated by this. Okay, moving on to the thrillers, we're going to start out with a little short novella, and this is called The Swamps. And this takes place in the Louisiana Bayou, which is the main reason why I wanted to pick it up, because I just love that setting. But this is about a couple who have this YouTube channel called The Ghost Patrol, and they go around investigating paranormal activities, and they go to this town in Louisiana to see if they can discover what happened to these two missing people. But then while they're there, they have some ghostly encounters and maybe other things that is also sinister happening. So what I didn't know until I started to record this video was that this book actually has pictures in it, which is super cool. So you have, just show you a couple of them. So I think that's pretty cool. Then we have the Stillwater Girls, and this is a book about cults, and there's these two girls that are in this isolated place where they don't really know much about modern life or anything like that, and they just live in this little cabin off the grid. But one day their mother leaves with their sibling to go see if she can get medical help for her kid who is very, very sick, and she never comes back. So they're just trying to survive, and then a stranger shows up at their cabin, and they're trying to escape him because the number one rule of their little cult is you never talk to strangers, which, you know, granted, that's not really a cult thing that's applicable to all of us, but my guess is that maybe he could potentially save them from this cult, but they're naturally afraid of him. Then we have The Room in the Attic, and this is about this family who move into their dream home only to discover that in the attic there is a hidden door and a hidden room behind a wardrobe up there, and they discover like keys and a wallet and a phone, you know, things that normally you would not just leave at your house and not take with you when you move. And so they're kind of wondering how these objects and these items ended up in this room, and the husband sounds like he becomes a little bit obsessed with it while the wife just wants to forget about it and just throw the stuff away. Then we have Woman Down, which is the newest by Colleen Hoover. I don't read any of Colleen Hoover's romances, but I did read Verity, and I was interested in picking this one up because it's a little more of a thriller / romance, I guess. So this is about this writer who has received some backlash, and people online are trying to cancel her, and so she doesn't really feel like writing anymore, but, you know, she needs to pay her bills, and she already has an outline for another thriller, so she decides to isolate herself and try and get this book written, and hopefully it can help salvage her reputation. But she's just not inspired. She doesn't have any inspiration to write until this detective shows up in her life and becomes her muse, and she becomes a little bit obsessed with him because she can write now, and she starts to have her main character in her novel kind of emulate this man that she met in real life. And then these next two I found in a free little library. The first one I've already talked about in my Mother's Day Rex, if you've seen that video, but it's called Mother's Instinct, and this is about these two families who have become very, very close. They moved in next door to each other, and their families became instant friends, and they both had sons at the same time, and so their sons grew up being best friends. But then something happens to where one of the sons ends up killed, and it's seemingly the other family's fault. And so now the other family is angry and upset about this, and they want to seek revenge and try to get their son killed. And so they're trying to protect their son from this crazy family that blames them for their son being killed. And then we have What the Wife Knew, and this is about this woman who marries this rich guy, and she plans on murdering him for his money, but unfortunately for her, somebody else murders him before she can. And so everybody thinks it's her, and so she's receiving all this hate and suspicion on her, but in this case, she didn't actually do it. And so now she has to wonder who actually murdered the husband and whether she needs to be watching out for herself, if she might be the next victim. Well, I guess this one is actually also from a free little library, but it's called Fear Nothing. And this is about a woman whose father was a known serial killer. He killed like 8 prostitutes. And now as an adult, she's a doctor specializing in fear and pain management. And her sister ended up going a different direction and following in her father's footsteps and murdered someone and has been in prison for the last 25 years. That's really all I know about it. I don't know what direction the plot takes after that. Then we have The New Neighbors by Claire Douglas, and this is about this couple who move into this new house, and they meet the sweet older couple next door, and first they seem really friendly, but then the wife, which is our main character, she is convinced that she overhears this older couple talking about a crime that they want to commit. her husband's just like, no way, they're just sweet old people, they're not going to do anything. But she's like, no, I think they're going to commit a crime, and she feels like it's her responsibility to stop them before something bad happens. Then we have Blind Date, and this is about a woman who's set up on a blind date by her best friend, and at first she thinks the date goes really, really well, and she even ends up at this guy's house, for a one-night stand. But when she wakes up the next morning in his bed, she soon realizes that perhaps she was actually kidnapped by this man. And then we have Love Mom, and this is about a girl whose mother was a famous thriller author, and she has since passed away. But at her mother's funeral, she receives this note, and it says, "From your #1 fan, XOXO," which I think is really cool that they put that on the side of the book. And then she receives a couple of other messages and starts to be afraid that this #1 fan is dangerous, and she needs to figure out soon who it is before something happens. And she also comes to realize that her mother is having secrets because this #1 fan also sent her some pages from her mother's diary, and it says something to the effect of, "I have a secret," want to know a secret, Love Mom. So she is not only trying to find out who this obsessive fan is, but she also wants to uncover the secrets that her mother never told her. Then we have Those Girls by Chevy Stevens. I read The Hitchhikers and really, really enjoyed it by this author, and so I wanted to try something else by her. And this sounds like it's about sisters who have a terribly abusive father with a mean streak and a bad temper. And so they finally decide to run away from home, but then they end up embroiled in a nightmare that's even worse than their father, and one of the sisters ends up going missing. And then I have a couple of thrillers from Frida McFadden, starting with The Surrogate Mother. And I actually just barely read this, so this will be in my upcoming May wrap-up if you want to hear my thoughts on it. But this is about this woman who had a really, really difficult time having kids. She did the whole IVF thing, that didn't work, so she tried adopting, but then the adoption went through, and she's just like, this is never going to happen for me, I'm never going to have a child. But then her assistant at her job tells her that she would be willing to be her surrogate mother if she agrees to pay for her to go back to school. And so this seems like a very beneficial plan for both of them, but then she soon starts to realize that there's something off about this assistant, and maybe she shouldn't be so trusting of her. And then we have Dear Debbie, and this is about this woman who has a column in the paper. I say paper, but I'm old school. It's probably an online column, but it's in the same vein as like Dear Abby, where she helps these women who maybe have abusive husbands or are going through hard times, or they can't relate to their kids or whatever else. And so she tries to help them, but then something happens and she ends up losing her job. And now that she has extra time on her hands, she's able to look more closely into her family, and she starts to realize that her husband has secrets and something's going on with her teenage daughter. And she just, starts to focus on her own family problems, and she starts to take her own advice from her own column and decides that she needs to take revenge on the people who have hurt her and who she feels deserves it. So that's all the thrillers that I have, so I'm moving on to horror. This one might be more of a horror fantasy. We have Down Among the Sticks and Bones, and this is actually the second in a series, but it says it can be a standalone. Although technically I think it's like the backstory to some of the characters from the first book. Not really sure, I haven't read the first book. But it said it could be a standalone, and this one just sounded more intriguing than the first one, so I'm just skipping that one and going straight to this one because it says it has something to do with mad scientists and Frankenstein type stuff, which I love and adore, and I hear it's a lot creepier than the first one, so I'm just starting here. It's a very short little novella, and all I know is about these two girls named Jack and Jill, and they were at this home for wayward girls or something, and one day they discover this mysterious staircase that takes them to some kind of a gateway to a different fantastical world. That's really all I know about it. And then I have The Haunting of Sorrow's Leap, and I don't remember what this is about, and the back doesn't have a synopsis on it, but obviously it's going to be some kind of ghost story. I'm always up for that. And then speaking of ghost stories, I got I Remember You. Everybody has been talking about this book for the past few years, and I'm finally getting around to getting it and reading it. I'm saving it for the winter months because it takes place in Iceland, and it's about these three friends that are renovating this old house, and there's a ghost there that wants them out. And then there's also another storyline going on where there's this old doctor who is trying to investigate the suicide of this older woman, and then he soon finds out that this woman was obsessed with his son that had vanished. And it actually says that some of this is based on true events, so that's pretty intriguing as well. And then we have Breathe In, Bleed Out, and this is a slasher, and I've heard people say that this is one of the best slasher books that they've read, so that's always exciting because slasher movies are really good, but I haven't really found a lot of book adaptations that were that great. The only one I can really think of that I really like was It's Not Her Time to Die Tonight or something like that. It's a YA novel. But anyways, this is about this woman who lost her fiance, and ever since his death, she's been having these vivid waking nightmares, and her friends tell her that she needs to get past his death and she needs to move on with her life, and so they take her to this wellness retreat where, you know, she can have spas and yoga and sound baths, and it's supposed to be relaxing and, you know, be a fresh start. But like I said, this is a slasher, so some psycho shows up and starts killing everyone. And then we have What the Dead Can Do. This is about this commercial flight that crashes, and it killed all 184 passengers, all except for this one little boy, this little 2-year-old. He was the only survivor in this plane crash, and so he ended up being raised by his parents' best friends. But his parents are now ghosts, but they've been watching out for him, and their friends, they discover, have secrets and they have addictions and they're a little bit abusive and they're just not good for their son. And so the father is like, you know, there's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is just try to mitigate it, try and be there for him. But, you know, we really can't intervene and he needs to just live his life. And the wife is like, heck no, this is my son and I'm going to save him and I'm going to protect him, even if it means having to kill him myself to get him away from these people that are not being good parents to him. And then I have The Bloody Brick Road, and this is a horror retelling of The Wizard of Oz. That's all I know about this. That's all I want to know going into it. So if you want to know a synopsis, then you can look it up yourself, but I just want to go into it blind. Then we have The Dead Husband's Cookbook by Danielle Valentine, and I really like Danielle Valentine, so I'm excited to read something else from her. I think I've only read YA novels from her. No, that's not true. I read Delicate Conditions by her. So anyways, I just want to read more from her because I like her writing and I like her stories. So this one is about this woman who everybody suspects has killed her husband, and she's this famous chef, and so people think that she cannibalized her husband and cooked him into her food. And then 30 years later, our main character is sent to this woman to write her memoir. And so she's trying to figure out whether the events in this past really did happen the way that people think, or if something else was going on. Then we have Winget, and this is about this girl whose parents have passed away in a car accident, and she's left to take care of her brother who is intellectually disabled. And so she finds this job as a companion to this woman named Allison Winget, because Allison has a bunch of trauma in her life because her dad murdered her mother and then tried to murder her. And so she's got all this trauma and nightmares and stuff, and so she's looking for somebody who can come be with her and help her through her trauma and her nightmares. And so she takes up this job, but of course when she gets to this creepy, isolated manor, as always happens, there's secrets and sinister things happening at that house. And then we have Asylum Hotel, and this is about this woman who is a photographer, and she loves taking pictures of old, isolated, and abandoned buildings. And so she goes to take pictures of this old asylum because it's about to be renovated. And so before it's renovated, she wants to take pictures of it in its dereliction and all that. And she meets this man who is a minor online celebrity, but he also has a passion for old buildings. And so he's also checking out this building for the last time. But then the following morning, this man is found dead at the bottom of a cliff, and everybody calls it a suicide or an accident, but she thinks that it was murder, and she wants to figure out how and why it happened, and if it has anything to do with the old asylum hotel that she's been taking pictures of. And then we have How to Fake a Haunting, and this is about this woman who has an abusive and alcoholic husband, and she wants to get away from him and divorce him, but he's very sly and clever and charismatic, and so she's afraid that even if she does divorce him, she's not going to end up having custody of their kid, and she's going to end up destitute without getting any of his money. And so she's just kind of down and out and doesn't know what to do. And her best friend tells her, well, hey, his alcoholism gives him these vivid nightmares and these hallucinations anyways, so let's just play on that and let's pretend that your house is haunted, and maybe it will drive your husband away and he'll just leave and then you'll be free. And so they put this plan into motion and they start making noises in the attic and putting flies on the windowsills and stuff like that. But apparently it works a little bit too well, not necessarily with the husband being afraid, but their fake haunting has stirred up a true haunting, because this house that they were living in does have all the emotions to make it into a haunted house. You know, it has the rage and the trauma and the murder and stuff, but nothing ever happened. But now that they're doing this fake haunting, it's stirring up the house and turning it into a real haunted house. So I think that premise is really unique and clever, and I'm really excited for this one. And then we have How Bad Things Can Get, and I've already read this one because I love Darcy Coates and I read everything that she comes out with right away. So this is about this influencer who, I don't know if he rented it out or if he owns it, but he has access to an isolated island, and he's going to have this reality TV show there. And so our main character becomes part of the contestants, because they invite like hundreds and hundreds of people, and then they just randomly choose the contestants, and she ends up being chosen. And so she reluctantly starts to perform in these elaborate challenges that are increasingly becoming dangerous. And she's not only afraid because the challenges are becoming more and more unsafe, but she's also not wanting to be a contestant because she has secrets that she's hiding in her own past. So this one gets pretty gory and gruesome and scary in some parts, and I would definitely recommend it. And then we have What Stalks the Deep, and this is the third in the Sworn Soldier series, and I really enjoyed What Moves the Dead. I thought it was really good. It was like a gothic retelling of the Fall of the House of Usher, and I really enjoyed it. The second one was okay. I really enjoyed the atmosphere and the descriptions, but outside of that, it wasn't really my favorite. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to pick up the third one, but I was like, you know, it's just a short little tiny novella, so why not? But I don't know, I haven't heard very many good things about it, so that's why I've not read it yet, even though it is so short, is because I just haven't heard of very many people that actually like it. So one day I'll get to it, but probably not anytime soon. And then I got Jamaica Inn. This is by Daphne du Maurier, which is the author of Rebecca, and I actually bought this because I watched a video by the booktuber Gavin, and he went to the real Jamaica Inn that this book is based on and read this book there, and it sounded like it could be fun and interesting, so I went ahead and picked it up. And this is about this woman who goes to visit her aunt at Jamaica Inn where she lives, and soon finds out that her aunt's husband is not a good guy. He's very abusive, and at this Jamaica Inn they're actually running like a smuggling and murderous criminal ring out of this hotel, and so she gets embroiled in that, and then she reluctantly starts having feelings for her aunt's husband's nephew. So she doesn't know if she can trust him, but she's catching feelings for him. Oh no, wait, sorry, it's not his nephew, it's his younger brother. Probably even worse. And then lastly we have Spectres in the Glass House, and this is about this woman who lives during 1921 Prohibition era, and she's very isolated and alone, and she starts having these psychic visions about these deaths, and every time somebody is murdered there's a dead butterfly at the scene, and her one solace in life is this glass house full of these butterflies. And then it sounds like there's a modern timeline as well about this researcher that goes to research the life of this mysterious woman and what she possibly knew about this serial killer. So this one I should have done yesterday because it's a YA novel, but I forgot about it, so I'm doing it today in part 2. So that is The Darkness Greeted Her, and this is about a girl who had an abusive father who passed away, and she has OCD, and because of her trauma, her father was always wanting her to be violent and always encouraging her to harm people, and so she has all of these intrusive thoughts, and so she ends up going to this wellness center in the woods to try and see if she can do better mental health wise. But of course things go wrong, or else this wouldn't be a horror novel. And so she starts seeing things, and she starts thinking that she's going crazy because she sees things that correlate with her father, like his favorite whiskey or a watch that he was buried with. And then one of the girls at this wellness retreat ends up being murdered, and she sees like a shadow man at the bottom of her bed one night, and she's wondering if whoever she's seeing is responsible for this girl's death. So that's it. That's all the books I have to share with you today. I do have a third installment coming next week, so look forward to that. I'm going to be doing all of my hardback thriller and horror books in that one. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. Please subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.